So what's the big problem with wealth creation? How do people like us, who didn't inherit a boatload of money, who are investing and building wealth from our own blood, sweat and tears, how do we invest in a way that gives us remarkable results and become financially free before retirement age? I don't know about you, but I am sick of hearing from wealth gurus and experts who don't walk their own talk and prescribe strategies that are a one-size-fits-all approach. For self-made people like you and me, I'm here to tell you that you don't need to be superhuman or already wealthy to reach financial freedom earlier than 65. Welcome back to the podcast, guys. Today, I'm really excited to have Julie Parker with me. She is someone whose paths crossed with mine a few weeks ago, but I find her story fascinating, and I definitely am looking forward to sort of unpacking a little bit about her journey around business and money. Hopefully you can glean some lessons from that. But Julie, thank you so much for making time. Welcome.
That's my pleasure, Salena. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to have met you too. Glorious human being.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, I'd love to kind of start with a bit of an overview of your story. I think the thing that fascinates me so much about your journey is it's definitely not conventional. So you come from the world of dentistry, but not in a practitioner sense. And so I'd love it if you could give everyone just a quick overview of how you came to be running the business that you are and maybe a bit of the journey that you've taken.
Sure thing, Salena. Yeah, so I was an early school leaver. I was actually kicked out of school because I stopped turning up. And that was just at the start of year 11. And back in the day, you could, go off and do secretarial school or become a hairdresser. But I also found out you could become a dental nurse without any training whatsoever. And so at the age of 17, with a timeline of 2 weeks to get a job, because my father was returning from overseas trip in that 2 week time, and I had to get a job, otherwise that would be the end of the world if I wasn't going to school or working. I started just ringing around every dental practice I could find and asking if they needed somebody. And after about 30 phone calls, I did get an interview, and that started my dental career. So once I got into dental assisting and treating patients and working in that kind of team environment, I absolutely loved it. And that kind of started the passion for dental practices. And then a bit later on, I went through all the different roles within a dental surgery, reception, patient coordinator, all those sort of roles. And when I was 33, I thought, you know what, I reckon I could run my own dental surgery. So ignorant was I. And so I went on this quest of visualization and taking action every single day to try to realize that dream of owning a dental practice. And 6 months later, I was standing in the waiting room of my own practice thinking, I don't know what just happened. It happened so quickly, but now I've got to run this place. It was a wonderful experience, that 6 month period of realizing that you can go out and just make something happen if you want it to happen. It depends on how much action you want to take and how passionate you want to be about it. But it was a lovely thing to kind of set me on that right path of business ownership, because as all these business people know, business owners know, it's a tough journey and there's a lot of ups and downs. I feel like it's one of the strongest self-awareness campaigns you can go on. It forces you outside of your own world, so that you have to really make sure that you're nurturing everybody around you. And then once
I love that.
Yeah. And I never had children. So I feel like that was my lesson on making sure that I put other people first in my life rather than just living all about me. And I owned the practice for 10 years and then sold it and became a dental practice management consultant, which is what I've been doing ever since.
Terrific. Well, look, I think in amongst all of that, what I would love to understand a little bit about is you mentioned that it was very important for your dad that you have a job by the time you got back from overseas. From your point of view, like, what was the emphasis, or what did money mean in your household growing up? And if you think about all the reasons why people are attracted to being entrepreneurs in the first place or being business owners, there's always different sort of ingredients that kind of make up that decision. But can you talk a little bit about maybe the essence of what drew you to running a business and the relationship with money?
It's interesting. It's the first time I've really realized it just from that question, that money was never part of it. So growing up in my home, traditional Aussie home, so dad worked, mum stayed at home, looked after the kids. I had 2 sisters, so there were 3 children in total. The reason why there was such a pressure on, because dad was very big about, you have to be useful. You have to be doing something useful. So if you're not out there learning and you're not running the home, then you've got to be working. You can't just sit around and do nothing. And so that's where that pressure came from, a good pressure came from. And then when I started on my dental practice ownership journey, I did step into that world of not having to worry about money. So we were kind of lower middle class growing up. Money was never a thing that kind of came easily. Dad always worked really hard for it. He usually had more than one job as well, and until a bit later on that he was more in management. And we were the ones who were like, oh, we were always the last one to get a television and get a VCR and all those sort of things. But it wasn't spoken about in the family as a thing. It wasn't that we're not getting a television because, or a VCR because we can't afford it, because we don't need one here in this house right now. And so we never kind of grew up with a sense of lack in any way. And then when I owned the dental practice, I'd taken over an ongoing concern, so it was already successful. And so I would have had to try hard to make it not successful. And I had a great team around me, and I stepped into that world of not having to worry about money. So no longer did I have to think about, oh, do I have enough money in the account to cover that insurance or that food bill or whatever. I was buying a new car every couple of years and go on holidays every year. And I didn't live the most lavish lifestyle by any chance. But the lifestyle I did live was never driven by, I've got to work hard to get more money or I've got to work hard to keep this money coming in. Again, I really didn't have a hook into that. And I think that really helped me as well, because I think it bleeds back into your values, doesn't it? And so when I was thinking about what kind of patient experience do I want to make sure the patients have when they come into the practice, and what kind of environment do I want team members to thrive in, the question was never about, as long as I can do it as cheaply as possible, as economically as possible. I was like, well, this is the money that I need to spend to get that environment. And so that's what I'll spend. And so I think it possibly helped me.
Yeah, I love that. And can you just sort of maybe expand a little bit in terms of like, obviously, when you became a business owner, the metrics around the sorts of money that you had flowing in and out would have changed significantly from, when you were even a practice manager, say, for example, where you're maybe paid a wage. What was the shift that you had to kind of go through from being, say, for example, an employee and then becoming a business owner? Because obviously the money dynamic does shift. And for some people, it can be quite jarring and quite a shock. How was it for you?
It was interesting because when I went on that 6-month journey of, okay, I'm going to go ahead and buy this dental practice, I'm going to visualize it, all the things, I was learning a bit about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming back then, and still am. I loved that space. And I became very aware that I had to become the person that owned a dental practice in order to have it even be on my radar and be a possibility. And so I really did wake up every morning and I thought to myself, I'm a business owner. I'm now driving to my dental practice every day. And I even did this actually with one of those, I think it's the Royal Melbourne Women's Hospital or something, that have a raffle or a prize of a multi-million-dollar house every year. And I used to buy tickets for that. Each ticket's $100. So it was a big investment. And this one particular house was actually just down the road from where I was living at the time. And it was being drawn on my birthday. And I'm like, that's it. That's my path to wealth. I'm going to be winning that. No dramas. And so every morning I would leave my home, drive to that place, and then think, now I'm driving off to work every day. So with the practice as well, I didn't end up winning that house, but with the practice, I really did step into the shoes of, I'm thinking like a business owner. I am a business owner. What would I be concentrating on today? It wasn't that I'm an employee wanting to traverse this big expanse of water and I wonder how I'm going to get there. I'm already there. So now how am I thinking? And I think that helped a lot because it shifted my identity. So when I did, I was standing in the waiting room for the first time, it felt like a natural progression. Yep. In a sense. And so I think that's a big part of it. I think our identity does control everything that we do. We have a perspective, an idea of what we are, who we are, what we can achieve, what our history's been, what our future's likely going to be. We've got this idea in our head, and Tony Robbins has a lovely way of saying it, but in essence, it is one of our deepest drivers as human beings is to match the image that we've got in our head of who we are. And we'll strive that out. So to achieve anything different. And for me, it was a big jump. We weren't a family of entrepreneurs or business owners. We always worked for other people. So it was a big jump outside the norm of what our family identity was. And I was at early school level. I was kicked out of school. I would never own a business. So I did have to really, and maybe thinking about it now, it needed to be such a big gap in order for me to truly recognize that need to identify myself as something different in order for me to be able to see what I could actually achieve.
Fantastic. Look, I'd love to kind of extrapolate a little bit and maybe go off on a tangent. One of the big things I'm very conscious of, I work with a lot of dentists as well. And one of the things that I think often comes as a shock to many of them is they go to university to study to be this great practitioner, and they're not necessarily anticipating the identity, as you call it, that they need to kind of assume as a business owner when they go out and practice in the real world. You know, what are some of the things that you've witnessed and where are the challenges? Because the big problem from my point of view is we're just not taught about these practical things at school. We're not taught about money. We're not taught about entrepreneurship versus going and getting a job. And so for many people, it's a real struggle. Like it's really like, well, this wasn't what I signed up for. So what sorts of struggles are you seeing, and how do you think people entering the world of practice ownership can sort of best handle those?
It's a fantastic question. And you're right. I hear this a lot. You know, I went through dentistry and we're really pushed out saying you've got everything you need now to be successful. But then you get out there and you're like, hang on, there's all these struggles that I'm having now too. And there's a terrific book behind me, my book shelf, that is, I think it might be this one, Mark Costas, it might be that one, it may not be, so I won't even quote it, but the title of it. But this dentist over in America interviewed a whole bunch of very well-established dentists who are close or in retirement and said, you know, what advice would you give yourself if you were just coming out of university? And what challenges did you find the biggest challenges? And of course, the biggest challenge was never how to do the best crown prep or filling. It was all relationship driven. And so I wish I'd learned earlier on how to speak with my team members. And I wish I learned earlier on how to communicate with patients. And so a lot of it is those soft skills. And when you think about it, when we go into the workforce, into any industry, straight from school or straight from university, that's the same journey we all go on. This is just a life journey, isn't it, of figuring out how to get along with the people around us that, you know, we share our life with. I think sometimes the thing that stops our learning about that are a couple of things. One, when I would find it easier because I came out of school early, and so there is a presumption that I'm still learning, that I'm not good at it yet. And that's part of my identity too. So I'm more embracing of that process, that thought of I'm not good enough yet, I'm still on my journey of learning. And so you can just not worry about what that means to you and just learn. However, with a uni student that comes out of dentistry and within university, you know, they do come out thinking pretty hot stuff here. Look at my degree, and you know, I've got this band of people around me that are going to help me treat my patients. And they need to have that level of confidence as well moving into it. You're not going to go ahead and build a strong relationship with a dentist who is really unsure and it seems like they don't know what they're doing. And so they need to have that level of confidence and authority as well for patients to be able to have faith and trust in them. However, possibly that also makes them feel like I need to be on top of things. I need to know my stuff now, including the relationships around me. And in order for me to be on that learning journey, I need the assistance of the people around me to get feedback from them and maybe do a bit of role playing with them and ask, how was that, performance review with you? Or, we had that conflict, how are we going to sort it out? And so they have to put themselves in a position which is outside that identity of competent professional dentist. They have to step back into student as well. And are they comfortable doing that? And do they even recognize a need for doing that? That might be all a very subconscious kind of war that's going on within themselves. So that willingness to embrace feedback, it's a tricky thing to embrace because it does say, I'm not good enough and I'm going to hear something uncomfortable that's going to make me feel possibly upset, possibly resistant to the information. However, if my biggest lesson is if you can say to your patients, say to your team members around you, how can I be better? How can I communicate better? How can I create a better environment for you? And for the workers, for the team members, it's how can I create a better environment for you to thrive and deliver your best? And for patients, how can I create a better environment for you to feel calm, less anxious and fully informed about what's going on? If you start asking that question and putting yourself in that vulnerable space, you only need to take on board feedback 3 or 4 times, and all of a sudden it's super easy, because what you find you get once you start receiving that feedback is fast-tracked self-development learning. And the joy you get from that sense of progress and becoming better so quickly, that's the motivator then to continue asking, how can I be better? How can I be better?
I love your response. And I guess where I'd love to go is maybe to a darker place, if you like, where people have trouble with this. It's not an easy transition. It's not an easy skill set to learn. How do I be a leader? How do I, run my team? And, the background against all of that is, how do I run a profitable business? Because ultimately, if you don't do that, the rest of it's kind of pointless anyway. What are some of the struggles that you've witnessed? And not to get into your secret sauce too much, but what is it that you're really advocating for in that context? Because I do think one of the biggest battles that a lot of practitioners face is they want the outcome, but they're resistant to the idea of really embracing how to be a business owner. And I say this, there's no question. A lot of business owners in general will say, look, the highest ROI or return on my investment of time and money is in my business. I can't get any investment in the world to give me the sort of return that I can inside my business. And yet there's that tension. So yeah, I'd love you to kind of maybe just pull that apart a bit, because it isn't easy. You've sort of talked a bit about the sorts of things that they need to address, but is it as easy as that, or is it harder than it sounds?
A lot of it is recognizing that that everyone's brilliant in what they do, and that there are so many different ideas, insights, strategies that are available to you only if you know about them, though. So, for example, if I had said to somebody in their first year of uni, you haven't tried doing fillings yet or anything like that, I'll go back to where my baseline thought is around this. When I owned my practice, it was possibly a big thing about ego, but I didn't want to be told how to do it. I wanted to figure it all out by myself. And yet, if I'd said to a dentist, you can figure out how to do a filling all by yourself. You haven't learned anything about it yet, but eventually you'll figure out how to do a filling. It's going to take a long, long time. And there's going to be a lot of failure in the meantime, a lot of damage to patients in the meantime as well. And so we go to university so we can learn the core principles of how to do the things that we do. And then we leave university and we are required by law to continue learning our craft, because we can't learn everything in that 5-year period or 6-year period. And there's always going to be new things coming along. And so to recognize that your university degree is just your first step. And there are so many facets. If you want to be really successful and actually be a dental practice owner or own another part of wealth creation in your world, don't think to yourself that you will ever be able to come up in a timely way with all the strategies and insights and ideas to be able to do it really well. And so just picture your brain as this huge bag of potential, and you just want to add as many things in it as possible. It doesn't mean you have to do those things. What you're doing is you're constantly every hour of every day, forever, gathering data that we will then discern with all of the other data that we've collected, comparing it to all of that, we will start to decide what we feel is going to be in keeping with our values in business and our values in personal life, what actually is going to fit in. Because I agree with you. I think there is a traditional path that we move down when we want to create a life, and from a financial perspective, a life. However, it's the people that think outside the box, that do things differently. They're the ones that are really achieving it. And so possibly looking at somebody who's got a level of success that you want and start looking at them and say, well, how do they think? How do they behave? Where do they get their information from? And start modeling that kind of behavior, because usually they are achieving a different kind of success because they're doing things differently to what they've ever been learned, and most of us learn.
I love that. I'd love to kind of pivot a little bit. We're in very tricky economic times right now. The last 3 years has been brutal for many business owners, including dentists. Given where we are in the market cycle, one of the biggest challenges and barriers to wealth building right now is this challenge around getting the right team and staff in place. There's kind of my observation is there's a couple of sides to this. One is that, you've got to be someone that people want to work for. But the flip side is that there's just not enough people, good quality people available all of a sudden to come work with us. What are you seeing on that front, and how are you kind of, I guess, advising and supporting people to kind of move through this really tricky time? time?
The first thing I'm saying because you're right, in the dental practice industry or profession, there has been, I think we lost over the COVID period, I think we lost something like 31% of our dental auxiliary staff base. And so that is a massive chunk out of it. And so what I've been saying is, number one, get out of resistance, because a lot of dentists that I speak to are saying, woe is the time that we're living in, I wish it was better, rather than looking for the solution. So try to stop resisting it. For a start, it is basic economics, and it will be true forever that when demand is low, and so when demand is high and supply is low, that prices go up. And so, yes, staff members are asking for increased wages. So just recognize that as a fact of life and stop trying to resist it. Stop trying to find the individual employees that are still willing to do it for what we were paying people a couple of years ago. The minute you embrace something, you stop resisting it. And when we're in resistance, we're not thinking about solutions at all. And referring earlier what we were talking about, there are people out there that do things differently. And they're the ones that look at a challenging situation and try to find the opportunity that's buried within it. And so recognize you've got an opportunity at the moment to, only if you're in solution mindset, and start tapping into podcasts, presentations, websites of people that do things differently. Let's have a thing. Is there a trend of thought that they're going down? For example, one of the solutions that a colleague of mine is putting in place, or has put in place, is virtual phone management and patient management from an admin perspective for dental practices. And so that's finding the opportunity in a challenging situation. So do look for those opportunities. But there is a range, I'm sure you'll agree, there is a range of environments that any working business actually offers their employees. And it goes from really bad, and they're probably being sued all the time by human relations companies, all the way through to the other end where it's like blissland. Recognize where you sit on that, because I go into many, many dental practices and I say, what kind of environment do you supply your team? It's like a family here. And then I get in there, I'm like, this is like a dysfunctional family here. And so don't use your own assessment of what it's like to work in your business. Ask the people that currently work there, reach out to those that no longer work there and have left over the last few years. Ask them, what could we be doing better? Because you're right, you need to make sure that you're creating an environment that people want to work in. So put yourself in the top 10%. Recognize we're not just going to do things ordinary here. We're going to do things extraordinary here, unanticipated. People are going to come here and say, are you kidding? This is where I'm going to end up working? And really create that, who was it that wrote the book about, and within the book itself, it talks about you get the right people on the right bus. And I say that's the second step of getting the right people in the right bus, in the right seats. First of all, you've got to make sure your bus is so beautiful that when the right person steps onto the bus, they're like, I'm not getting off this bus. Because when you look at some of the adverts to try to appeal to employees to come and work with you, the advert states a whole beautiful environment, and then they turn up and they're like, yet again, I've kind of been conned. It's not what you described. And so there is a little bit of suspicion for employees that have been around the traps that recognize that the ad is the best possible facade that you could put out there, and what's going on behind the scenes is quite often quite different. But do recognize that need. People nowadays, it's not good enough just to say, I've got a job and I earn money, therefore I'm lucky. Jobs can be found anywhere. Now people want to get into a job. They want a bit of flexibility with their hours if possible. They want to be able to learn and grow in that job. Progress equals happiness. They want to have mastery over what they do. They don't like being micromanaged. They don't like to have every step of their day controlled by somebody else. Start to really look into and research, what is Blissland working environment? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How much does it cost? And then try to strive for that. In the dental practice world, there are some dental practices that are heavily controlled by insurance companies in terms of the fees that they can charge. And I feel for them. I would never have handed that kind of control over to an external entity when I had my business. And I didn't know much about business, but I still knew that that was a crazy step to take. And so if they're in those kind of environments, I suggest stepping out of that environment. We can certainly help them step out of that environment. But if you've got control over your fees, then you have got control over the environment that you create for team members. You want to have the cream of the crop coming to your dental practice and working there happily, and then you'll start attracting more and more of the same kind. Definitely, I am encouraging, let's get more people into our industries as possible, and let's bring back good mentorship. So bring a trainee. I say that every dental practice that has 2 surgeries or more should be always having a trainee on site.
We are obviously on the I Can Be Wealthy podcast right now, and I'd love to get your sense of when you talk to practice owners about the financial aspects of success in their businesses, what are the maybe top 3 metrics that you look at? Because obviously the first one people go to is, well, what's your profit? But yeah, like what are the financial metrics for wealth, success and success? If you think about your investment of time and money into your business, what sort of things do you focus on?
Certainly we need to be enjoying what we do. So it's always checking in with yourself on a regular basis that you are enjoying life and enjoying what you do. But a big part of that is your mindset, because people can be blissfully happy in a impoverished little town in a country that has no running water, and they can be blissfully happy. Don't think to yourself, I need to have a specific turnover, a specific this or specific that in order to be happy in my work. I really think everything does come from the energy that we put out in the world. So if you are not happy at the moment, then let's take steps on recognizing that in your current state with nothing changing, you can really transform your level of happiness in what you're doing. Let's make sure that the energy we're putting out there is the kind of energy that's going to be attracting people around us and an environment around us where we can be successful in all areas. And so make sure we get self right. But then the other metrics are certainly turnover, but the metric that I feel like is more compelling for dentists themselves, whether they're a dental practice owner or dentist who's actually an employee in a practice, because I say with employee dentists, you are really running your own small business within the small business that you work for. In your own entity, you're your own small business. And so I say hourly production rate is enormously important. If we are wanting to have our team members be on this constant never-ending improvement journey, that's why we have performance reviews. How have you been? How can you grow? How can we all get better? Then do it for yourself as well. And that great metric is the hourly rate. And so not the hourly rate if you're only half booked and, but you're still there for 8 hours. The time that you're in the surgery with a patient, what is that hourly rate? Track it every single month. You will be surprised at how little tweaks in how I communicate with the patient, how I present a treatment plan, how I can become more efficient and productive in the way I do fillings. And again, this is what I'm generating so far myself with all the things, all the skill sets that I need to bring to my role. What are other people doing and how can I adopt some of their bits and pieces to become more efficient, more productive and happier in my space? And you'll be surprised at how quickly that hourly rate starts to increase. And if you don't keep an eye on it, you can also be very surprised at how quickly it depletes as well, because you start thinking, I'll just add an extra 15 minutes onto that appointment time because it's a Friday. I like Fridays to be a little bit slower. Or I won't go nuts trying to fill that 1 hour gap this afternoon. Got a couple of things I can do online for myself, some online shopping or something. But all of those situations added up over a whole year, they have an enormous impact. And so when we're talking about being productive as a dental practice, one of the core things that you need to be doing in order to have sustained productivity and control over that income and that turnover is to make sure that your patients are returning and that they are accepting the treatment plans that you're suggesting. Because if they're not, it's highlighting an area of communication that you need to be more aware of and improving. And so I tend to say that the hourly rate's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, look, Julie, this has been really insightful. For any of the dentists that are listening, please look at the show notes and go check out Julie. She's quite a dynamo. And Julie, thank you so much for making time today. I'd love to do maybe a part 2. I had a whole list of questions we didn't get to, but thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome.
That's my absolute pleasure, Salena. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
If you're feeling frustrated that despite doing everything right in the property investing playbook and you're no closer to financial freedom, then head on over to incosiwealth.com to learn more about how you can use alternative investments to catapult your investing income and blend strategies to shave decades off your timeline to financial freedom. See you on the next episode.